After the car accident, my arch-nemesis came to visit me. Just to mess with him, I pretended to have amnesia and called him honey. He froze. Just as I thought I'd succeeded, he gently touched my head and said, "I'm here, babe." Post-accident, I was laid up in the hospital for a few days. It wasn't too serious, so I was recovering pretty well. Still, to be safe, my mom insisted I stay longer for observation. My best friend Helen was one of the first to visit after my parents. I had just woken up and was still a bit groggy. Seeing my dazed expression, Helen asked worriedly, "Rose, are you okay?" With all the TV drama I'd watched, I thought it would be fun to pretend I'd lost my memory and fool her for a bit. So I acted all confused. "Who are you?" Helen held my hand sincerely. "Did you lose your memory, Rose? I'm Helen, you know, the one you owe $5,000 to." I quickly dropped the act and pushed her away. "Get lost." She burst out laughing. "With that acting, trying to fool me." "Please." Feeling defeated, I asked, "Is my acting really that bad?" She nodded. "Don't doubt it, it is." Not ready to admit defeat, I hatched a silly plan with her. I'd tell everyone I had amnesia to see who could see through it. The next day, a few relatives and friends came by, and I successfully fooled most of them. Feeling smug, munching on an apple, thinking maybe my acting wasn't so bad, the door suddenly opened. I prepared to jump into amnesia mode, but froze when I saw who it was. Standing at the door was someone tall and handsome, resembling a movie star. My childhood betrothed and rival, Johnny. Never thought he'd visit. I always believed he hated me. Before the accident, we agreed to tell our parents next week about breaking off the engagement. Our grandfathers had arranged it since they were best friends. Little did they know, we'd grow to despise each other. I approached Johnny about cancelling the engagement, still holding a shred of hope he'd protest. He didn't, just nodded and said, "Okay." I figured he must really hate me to be so indifferent. Who cares? I hate him too. I reassured myself. Neither of us had told our families yet. We planned to break the news together next week. But then, the accident happened. Johnny and I exchanged glances, silence filling the room. He finally stepped closer to my bed, breaking the quiet with a deep, "I heard you've lost your memory." My mind blanked, but I nodded, yes. Feigning confusion, I asked, "And you are?" Johnny raised an eyebrow. "Johnny." Regaining my playful spirit, I asked, "So you're the one I have an engagement with?" "Yes." In that moment, a mischievous idea sparked. If he hated me, I'd gross him out a bit. Suddenly, I grabbed his hand and called out, "Honey," in a pitiful tone. Johnny stiffened, a crack in his ice-cold demeanor. "What did you call me?" "Honey." "We're engaged, so you're my hubby, right?" He looked thunderstruck, completely motionless. Determined to nauseate him further, I whined, "Why'd you take so long? My head hurts." Johnny silently stared at me with an unreadable expression. It was intense, like he wanted to devour me whole. Nervous I'd been caught, Johnny unexpectedly broke the tension, gently patting my head. I was the one stunned now. His voice was soothing. "I'm here, babe." Things took a bizarre turn. Either Johnny's been possessed, or my brain got truly jumbled in the crash, and this is all in my head. But he felt real. Ever so discreetly, I pinched Johnny's cheek. The feel was authentic, firm to the touch, definitely real. Gently moving my hand away, he helped me lie back down. I stayed still, letting him adjust the covers. "The doctor says rest is key. Get some sleep. I'll be back tomorrow." Eyes wide open, I searched his face for any hint of a trick. Was Johnny also playing me, waiting to kick me when I least expect? My headache from the crash worsened with this new twist. Noticing my pallor, Johnny grew concerned, head hurting. I nodded. He moved to summon a nurse, but I stopped him. "I'm fine. Just stay with me." His ears tinged red. He sat in a chair beside me, not refusing my request. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Back in the day, if I tried to get all touchy-feely with Johnny, he'd definitely get mad. But now, not only is he not mad, he listens to me. What's going on with him? I glance at Johnny. He's sitting quietly like he's deep in thought. When our eyes meet, he quickly looks away. The more I think about it, the less I understand. Maybe it's because I'm just recovering. My brain gradually stops thinking, and I drift off to sleep. When I wake up, Johnny's gone. I stare blankly at the ceiling, thinking, I'm definitely dreaming. When Helen shows up with a big bag of snacks, I'm excited and tell her, "You know what? I had this dream where I called Johnny honey, and instead of getting mad, he patted my head and soothed me to sleep." Helen opens a bag of chips and looks at me sympathetically. "Poor thing. Only in dreams can love you can't have seemed possible." I grab some chips and take a big bite. "Speak for yourself." Just as Helen opens a box of cake, Johnny walks in. He nods at Helen, then he walks over to my bed, takes the chips from my hand, and gently wipes the crumbs from my mouth. The doctor said you should avoid snacks while you're sick. With a thud, Helen drops her cake on the floor. Both Johnny and I look over. Helen's mouth is wide open, like she could swallow me whole. The next second, she lets out an inappropriate and loud shriek in the hospital room. Helen is clearly in shock. She tells me in a daze, I feel like I just saw a ghost. After Johnny leaves, Helen, still confused, asks me, what's going on? Didn't you say Johnny hates you? Weren't you supposed to go next week to break off the engagement? And Mr. OCD, Johnny wiped your mouth. This is crazy. I explain the situation to her as best as I can, but Helen still doesn't get it. You called him honey, and he went along with it. What happened to being sworn enemies? I couldn't give her an answer, so I just asked her to keep my pretend amnesia under wraps for now. While Helen and I are both questioning reality, someone bursts into the hospital room. It's Mark. I can tell from the voice. Mark gives me a bear hug. Rose, are you okay? How did you end up in a car accident? Helen said you lost your memory. Do you remember me at all? I'm your most handsome, charming, closest friend. I can barely breathe under his hug, so I push him away a little. Get off me. I'm gonna suffocate. Mark, Helen, and I have known each other since middle school. We're really close. He's got a great personality, super good looking, and girls love him. He constantly has a string of girlfriends. Since the three of us hang out a lot, people often mistake Mark and me as a couple. But Helen and I just see him as a good buddy, because we're really close. After letting go a bit, Mark looks me over. Good, no scars. You're still as pretty as ever. Helen asks him, how many days has it been? Why are you just getting here now? I messed up. I was deep in the mountains for this project with no signal. By the time I saw your messages, it was 2 days later. But I flew straight back, traveled for a day and night, and came right to the hospital. You know how important Rose is to me. I was worried sick. Mark seems genuinely exhausted, so I reluctantly forgive him. Fine, you're forgiven. Mark gives me a thorough look over. Rose, you really okay? I'm really fine. Just as I say that, I remember something. Oh, I'm pretending to have amnesia right now, so play along. Mark looks confused. Why? I'm about to respond when Johnny suddenly walks in. As soon as he sees Mark, his eyebrows pull into a tight frown. Just a second ago, Mark was all smiles, but now his expression has turned serious. The next second, both say at the same time, what are you doing here? In my mind, I'm screaming, oh no. Mark and Johnny don't get along. Mark can't stand Johnny because he thinks Johnny is always mean to me. But Johnny doesn't like Mark either. He always seems irritated when he sees Mark, for some reason. I'm trying to think of a perfect explanation when Johnny strides forward. As he walks past Mark, he doesn't even look at him. Instead, he gently takes Mark's hand off my shoulder. Totally unprepared, Mark's hand falls back easily. Johnny stands between me and Mark, feeling my hand. Your hand's cold. Then he pulls the blanket up around me. You need to stay warm. With a loud thud, Mark's backpack hits the floor. Johnny, Helen, and I all glance over to find Mark's face darkened, with his mouth agape like he could swallow me whole. This scene feels familiar. I quickly move to cover my ears, but instead feel warmth on them. I look up to see Johnny cupping my ears with his hands. Helen rolls her eyes at us and covers her ears as well. Sure enough, the next second Mark lets out a familiar, piercing shriek. Mark looks at both me and Johnny, opening and closing his mouth for a good half-minute, before finally calling out, Rose, you. But before he can finish, Johnny butts in and ungraciously shoos him away. She needs rest. You guys should leave. What gives you the right? Before Mark can finish his sentence, Helen drags him out the door. The room goes silent in an instant. Johnny seems uncertain, but eventually speaks first. Do you still remember him? I go along with my act, vaguely. Seems like a good buddy. Johnny's next question catches me off guard. Just a friend. What's that supposed to mean? Confused, I ask. Isn't he? Johnny's expression relaxes a bit. Yeah, you and him are just regular friends. Like super regular, he adds. Maybe he should visit less often. Why? He's too loud, interrupting your recovery. Unbothered, Johnny feels the back of my hand again, feels warmer. Get some sleep. I'm heading out. I nod obediently. After Johnny leaves, I check my phone and see a flood of messages from Mark. What's going on, Rose? I heard from Helen, but I still don't get it. It's a conspiracy, must be. That stone-faced Johnny must be up to something with you. Are you leaving me, Rose? I'm so upset. I love you so much. I reply with just one word, quit. Honestly, I'm fed up with Mark always saying such gross stuff. I can't handle it. Since coming back, Mark's been here every day. I told him to stop coming, but he wouldn't listen. Inevitably, he'd run into Johnny. On the third time Johnny tried to kick him out, Mark snapped. Who are you anyway? I was hanging out with Rose when you didn't even know where you were. Johnny replied, Rose and I have been betrothed since we were kids. So what? It's the 21st century now. And didn't you both plan on calling it off next week? I gave Mark a hard pinch to stop him from saying more. I told Mark I was going to sleep and hurried him out, worried he'd say something dumb. You better go, I said. Mark looked at me all hurt, but I gave him a stern glare until he reluctantly left. After he left, Johnny stayed silent for a long time. I called out, Johnny. He let out a sigh and looked at me for a moment. Then he asked, do you remember what we were supposed to do next week? My heart sank. Why was he asking? Was he still planning on ending our engagement? I braced myself and said, I don't remember. Maybe it was just my imagination, but Johnny seemed relieved. Then he gently took my hand and said, Rose, we were supposed to get engaged next week. Johnny and I had been engaged since we were kids. His parents worked out of town, so he lived elsewhere until high school. He only came back because of high school exams. I first met Johnny during the summer before freshman year. When I saw him, I was blown away. I couldn't believe there was such a handsome guy. At that moment, I thanked my grandpa for giving me such a good-looking future husband. Johnny was already reserved and had a bit of a cold expression. As I chatted away introducing myself, he just said, can you be quiet for a bit? I was taken aback, a little hurt, but I shut my mouth. Not a great start. I wanted to make up for it, so I peeled an orange for him. However, Johnny refused right away. I thought he was just being shy and insisted he take it. It's fine, just have a piece. But in the struggle, the orange slipped from my hand and made a mess on Johnny's brand new white shirt. I was mortified and kept apologizing. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Johnny looked annoyed. Can you just stay away from me? I went home that day feeling dejected. Ever since, I kept thinking maybe Johnny and I were destined to clash from the start. Maybe if I listened to him and didn't pester him, he wouldn't hate me so much. But I was young and stubborn, so I still shamelessly hovered around him. Johnny was in the student council, so every Friday he'd be at the school gate checking for TARDIS and uniform violations. Because of that, every Friday I'd put a little extra effort into my appearance. But Mark, that idiot, would oversleep every Friday, and I'd end up dragging him to school by his collar. By the time we got to the school entrance, my carefully styled hair was a mess from the wind. Unaware of my disheveled look, I ran toward Johnny with Mark in tow, grinning. What a coincidence. Johnny didn't say anything, just cast a cold glance at my hand gripping Mark's collar before turning away. Being ignored, I awkwardly scratched my nose. Mark, defending me, slung an arm around my shoulders and jeered at Johnny. What's your problem? Get off. Stay away from me. Don't touch me. I shrugged Mark off and beamed at Johnny. He's an idiot. Don't mind him. Johnny stayed silent, his eyes darting between Mark and me, furrowing his brow even more. Growing up spoiled by my parents, I was always cheerful, but being ignored constantly was starting to wear on me, and I felt dejected. The time I truly became disheartened was during a friend's birthday party that Johnny also attended. After cake cutting, everyone started smearing cream on each other's faces. I'd just smeared some on Helen when Mark sneakily attacked me, rubbing globs all over my face. I squealed and chased him around, yelling, "You idiot, I'm gonna get you." While running, I accidentally bumped into someone. I quickly apologized, realizing I'd run into Johnny. I stared at him, at a loss for words. Then Mark looped back to drag me away. We only managed a few steps before Johnny grabbed my other hand, speaking coolly, "You got my shirt dirty." With that, I noticed the cream smeared on Johnny's chest, likely from our earlier collision. I quickly let go of Mark, apologized, and started wiping the cream off Johnny's shirt. I was very thorough, so it took some time. Johnny just quietly watched me clean up the mess. Finally done, I apologized again. Johnny handed me a tissue, saying, "You might want to wipe your own face too." With that, he left. Holding the tissue, I was ecstatic. Johnny cared about me. Wow. The more I thought about it, the happier I was. So I decided to go find Johnny again. I glanced around and saw him on the balcony with friends. Skipping towards him, I overheard one of his friends saying, "Aren't you and Rose like engaged? But she seems pretty close with Mark. Is he her boyfriend?" I was about to jump in and explain, but Johnny's words rooted me to the spot. "I don't know her," he said. "We're not close." Then, as if recalling something, he added, "Besides, she's really annoying." That was the moment I decided to give up on Johnny. I stopped circling around him, avoided eye contact, and walked the other way whenever he was nearby. Isn't it funny? Johnny didn't like me, but too bad. I didn't like him now either. Feeling incredibly frustrated, I agreed to a friend's invitation to go on a hike. When we were about to head out, I realized Johnny was part of the group going out to have fun. When our eyes met, Johnny pursed his lips, like he wanted to say something, but I just turned my head away quickly. Among the group, there was a guy named Richard who was into me. He was really attentive and handed me a drink. "Rose, want one?" "Thanks." I took the drink, opened it, and had a sip. Richard seemed like he wanted to chat more, but then Johnny, who was busy setting up a grill, called out to him, "Richard, come give me a hand." Richard answered and headed over to where Johnny was. Feeling a bit frustrated, I decided to wander off on my own for a while to clear my head. As I walked, I got the feeling someone was following me. I turned around and saw Johnny. I wasn't sure if he was really following me, so I just quickened my pace, trying to keep some distance. To my surprise, when I walked faster, so did he. When I slowed down, he matched my pace. I realized he was definitely trailing me. I stopped in my tracks and turned to him angrily. "Why are you following me?" Johnny stayed calm compared to my irritation, but the question he asked stunned me. "Are you planning to be with Richard? Why do you care about that?" I snapped. "Rose, you know high school relationships aren't real." I didn't like Richard, but Johnny's lecturing annoyed me even more, making me want to argue. "Aren't you the one who finds me annoying? Why do you care? It's none of your business even if I date early." Johnny paused for a moment. I don't. Remembering his previous cold shoulder, hearing him say I was annoying, all of it made my emotions spill over. "Johnny, you don't want to talk to me. Fine, neither do I. From now on, we're strangers." I didn't wait to see Johnny's reaction, and hurried back to the campsite. Everyone had overheard my argument with Johnny and asked what happened. I calmed myself and said, "I'm heading out. From now on, don't invite me to anything Johnny's attending. We just don't get along." After that, everyone knew Johnny and I weren't on speaking terms. We barely talked again after that. It wasn't until we graduated college that my mom brought up our arranged childhood engagement, and I called him up to talk it over. I arranged to meet him at a cafe. By the time I arrived, he was already there. Johnny was dressed pretty formally, white shirt, black tie, hair neatly styled. His hands were clasped, and he seemed a bit nervous. I was taken aback for a moment, thinking he might be heading to some fancy gala after this. When he saw me, he spoke in a slightly strained voice. "Rose." I cut him off. "Johnny, let's call off the engagement next week." When I finished speaking, Johnny seemed to freeze, not saying a word for a while. With his silence, I continued, "You hate me, I hate you. There's no point in this engagement, right?" Deep inside, I hoped he'd say otherwise, but after quite some time, he only replied with one word, "Okay." Life is full of unexpected twists. How did calling off the engagement turn into getting engaged? Johnny seemed so straightforward, yet he lied so effortlessly without batting an eye. I was in shock. Engaged. Johnny, unfazed, said, "Our parents kept pushing us, so naturally, the plan was to get engaged next week." I couldn't wrap my head around it. "Isn't this too sudden?" Johnny looked at me with his deep brown eyes. "Not sudden at all. I've liked you for a long time. I've wanted to get engaged for a while." He sounded so genuine, like he'd rehearsed it 100 times in his head. Completely believable. My heart skipped a beat, and all I could think was, Johnny says he likes me. Even knowing something felt off, I couldn't think straight. Even if it was a trap ahead, I'd jump right in. Helen used to tell me, "You're such a pushover. Remember in high school when you cried to me for days, saying you'd never talk to Johnny again? Now just seeing him makes you smile. So why'd your eyes disappear?" She wasn't wrong. As soon as Johnny holds my hand, all my feigned toughness and pride vanish, and I forget we were ever at odds. Sigh. Love can be such a foolish thing, an incurable condition. I had 1,000 questions to ask, but I could only say, "Can we really get engaged now with me like this?" "We can," Johnny assured. "You just focus on recovering. I'll handle everything else." After nearly 2 weeks in the hospital, I was finally discharged. On my release day, Johnny took the day off to take me home. He carried all my luggage back to my rented place. Seeing the messy apartment, he asked, somewhat worried, "Can you manage on your own?" "No problem," but Johnny still seemed unsure. "What about lunch?" "I never cook. I always order takeout." "No way," Johnny contradicted. "You just got out of the hospital. You can't eat that stuff." He opened my fridge, sighed at the sight of a few beers, and after thinking for a moment, he turned to me. "Rose, why don't you move in with me?" I was caught off guard. You're still recovering. You need proper nutrition. I can cook, and make sure you eat right." The happiness was so sudden it left me dazed, unable to say anything. Johnny probably thought my silence was hesitation and added, "It's okay if you don't want to. I can cook and bring it over to you every day, even though I'll have to drive over an hour to get here. Then another half hour to work, which means waking up early, but I don't mind." Hurriedly, I said, No, I'm willing." Johnny finally smiled. "Then I'll help you move in this weekend." Before moving, we had our engagement party. To avoid a big reveal, I suggested keeping it simple. So, it was just a dinner with both sets of parents, no other guests. Johnny's mom held my hand, beaming. Rose, I'm so happy. You know, Johnny's always been so reserved. Never knew who he took after. But I know every time you came around, he'd light up. Later, when you didn't come around, I asked him what happened between you two, and he was all frowns. I was shocked, because Johnny usually seemed like he couldn't wait for me to leave whenever I went over. I wondered how his mom thought Johnny was happy. Johnny's mom continued, saying, his dad and I are both worried you guys are gonna call off the engagement. We're so on edge every day. Thank goodness that hasn't happened. Feeling guilty, I forced a smile. After the engagement party, I invited Helen and Mark over to my place for dinner to drop some big news. When I showed them my engagement ring, Helen screamed like a banshee. Her screech was loud enough to blow the roof off. Mark, who would usually scream along with Helen, was unusually silent. He stared at my ring and asked in a strange voice I'd never heard before, Rose, are you really gonna marry Johnny? I nodded, yeah, for real. Helen started gossiping like crazy, and I just played along. I didn't think much about Mark's odd behavior. Halfway through the gossip session, Helen got a call. Apparently, there was something urgent from work, so she left in a hurry. I saw her to the door, but Mark was nowhere to be found when I got back to the living room. I searched the rooms and found him standing out on the balcony. What are you doing out here? I walked over, puzzled. It's almost 9, you should head home. Under the moonlight, Mark's expression was unreadable. I wasn't used to seeing him like this. He was usually so cheerful, always joking around with the pretty girls. Rose, do you really like Johnny? I blushed and mumbled, not really, just kinda. Kinda. He laughed like he didn't believe me. Then why did you run to him without hesitation when he beckoned? Did you forget how he used to treat you? Mark's sharp words left me confused. What's your point? Does he really like you? If he did, would he make you sad? Now all of a sudden he wants to get engaged, and you just said yes. His words stung, and I snapped back. Mark, are you serious right now? I turned away. You should leave. I think work has your brain fried. Mark's voice stopped me. Rose, what if I said you should consider me? It felt like I got hit by lightning. You've always liked Johnny, so I kept quiet. I was afraid that if I told you, we couldn't even be friends anymore, Mark continued. I wanted to be there for you, so I chose to keep silent. My mind went blank. Then why are you speaking up now? I thought there was no chance with you and Johnny anymore, but I was wrong. And if I don't say it now, I might not get another chance. He gave a bitter smile. I had my doubts before. Sometimes Mark's flirtatious words and actions made me suspicious, but he always acted like a playboy, and everything sounded like a joke. He treated every girl that way. I was scared to ask, fearing I'd come off as foolish. So, I always pretended it was a joke, gently pushing him away, intentionally keeping Helen around to avoid being alone with him. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Leave. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear any of this. Rose, Mark said again. Go, I repeated. With a sigh, Mark headed for the door. Just as he was about to step out, he froze. I followed his gaze and saw Johnny standing by the elevator. This was really trouble. Johnny looked at Mark. Didn't you hear her? She wants you to leave. Worried they'd fight, I pulled Johnny inside and shut the door. My head was in chaos, and I slumped onto the couch. Johnny sat beside me and gently turned my shoulder to face him. What's the matter? I didn't know what to say, so I just shook my head. But then Johnny dropped a bombshell. Mark confessed to you, huh? I snapped my head up. How? How did you know? Was it really obvious? I stammered. Yeah, pretty obvious. I avoided his eyes, but he held my shoulders, making sure I couldn't look away. Rose, what are you thinking? Afraid of a misunderstanding, I quickly said. I don't like him that way. He's just a friend to me. Johnny patted my head. Okay, I got it. You knew he liked me. I did. I remembered how Johnny always seemed irritable whenever he saw Mark since high school. Back then, I didn't understand why. If Johnny knew about Mark liking me, it kinda made sense. But then, did Johnny like me since high school too? I wanted to ask, but couldn't muster the courage. So I kept the question to myself. After Johnny left, I called Helen and told her about Mark. Helen, he really confessed. Me? You knew too. She sighed. Everybody's been avoiding the elephant in the room, afraid it'd mess up the balance. So no one ever said it. Mark was like that, you're like that, and so am I. I sighed too. What a mess. By the way, how long are you gonna pretend with that memory loss? You can't keep faking forever. Helen was right. I couldn't keep this up forever. But I was too scared to tell Johnny that I was just tricking him, pretending to have memory loss to mess with him at first. He'd definitely be mad. I didn't want this dream to end. That weekend, Johnny helped me move my stuff to his place. We also went to the supermarket to pick up some essentials. While shopping, I bumped into someone I knew, my college roommate Wendy. Wendy's such a sweetheart. When she heard about my accident, she came to see me right away. She hadn't met Johnny, but I told her about the engagement. Seeing us holding hands, she immediately guessed. You must be Rose's fiancé, right? Johnny nodded. Hello, I'm Johnny. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Rose's college friend. Wendy's a chatterbox. Once she starts, she doesn't stop. She told us she got engaged the other day, and we were shocked. She never had a crush or dated anyone in college, so it was surprising. Trying to stop her, I said, okay, that's enough. But Wendy kept going on and on. You should really treat Rose well. She's great, though sometimes she deserves a slap. Like, after her car accident, I visited her, and she pretended to have amnesia to trick me. But I saw through it right away. Her terrible acting. Only a fool would believe it. Silence. A long silence. As soon as Wendy said that, I knew we were screwed. Wendy chuckled to herself, then looked at me and Johnny, confused. What's wrong with you two? Why do you both look so upset? Johnny and I still didn't speak. Luckily, Wendy got called by her friend, waved goodbye to us, and left. I couldn't look at Johnny. Just kept my head down and walked quickly ahead. Johnny silently pushed the cart and followed me. The faster I walked, eventually leaving Johnny behind and rushing out of the grocery store. My phone rang, Johnny's name flashing on the screen. With trembling hands, I ignored the call and just turned off my phone. I was scared that if I answered, Johnny would say, Rose, what you did was too much, let's break up. Helen's place was nearby, so I ran to her house, frantically ringing the doorbell. She opened the door, saw my pale face, and asked, bewildered, what's going on? I collapsed onto her couch. It's over. My fake amnesia act was exposed. Johnny must hate me now. Helen didn't know what to say, so she grabbed a few beers from the fridge for me. Want a drink? I usually can't handle alcohol well, and Helen would always tell me to go easy. But today she didn't stop me, just watched as I downed one bottle after another. As expected, I got drunk and passed out. When I woke up, still groggy, I thought I saw Johnny. Johnny, is that you? I asked tearfully. Johnny looked at me and nodded. Maybe the alcohol gave me courage. I couldn't help it. I wrapped my arms around him, buried my face in his neck, and sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm a liar. I shouldn't have tricked you. You can't leave me. Johnny's body was tense. After a few seconds, he slowly hugged me back. How could I leave you? I was afraid you'd leave me. You wouldn't answer my calls, even shut off your phone. If it weren't for Helen, I wouldn't have found you. I sobbed harder, tears and snot everywhere. I turned off my phone, because I was scared you'd break up with me. I knew you found out I lied and would be mad. Not mad. Didn't I lie to you too? About us doing great, about us getting engaged. Johnny gently patted my back. I sort of figured you were pretending, but I didn't want to call you out. I preferred to believe the lie. Do you know why? All the hints flashed through my mind like lightning. I cautiously asked, because you like me. He sat me up, made me look him in the eyes, then asked, do you like me? I sniffled, yes, since high school, it's only ever been you. Johnny grabbed a tissue, carefully wiped away my tears. What a coincidence. Me too. The day Mark left for abroad, I didn't see him off. After some thought, I texted him, safe travels. He replied quickly, thanks, then added, I'm sorry. Staring at those 3 words, I was a bit stunned. Johnny came over and wrapped an arm around me. What's up? I showed him my chat with Mark. He's moving abroad, probably for good. Johnny raised an eyebrow, his tone neutral. Oh, but the slight twitch of his lips gave him away. I teased him. You were waiting for this day, weren't you? Yeah, he admitted without hesitation. His annoying. I clicked my tongue, and then something hit me. Annoying. Back in sophomore year, I overheard Johnny telling his friends on the balcony that someone was annoying. I thought he meant me. I quickly asked Johnny, hey, remember in sophomore year, during a birthday party, you were on the balcony saying I was annoying. What? Johnny paused, remembered, and said, no, I was talking about Mark. He was always hovering around you, and it bugged me. Oh, it clicked for Johnny. You overheard, misunderstood. Is that why you suddenly avoided me? Caught in my act, I boldly said, even if you weren't talking about me, you were so cold back then that I had every right to ignore you. Johnny kissed me. You're right. I deserved it. I won't do it again. He accepted blame quickly, and as his kisses grew deeper, I lost all desire to think about anything else. The car accident wrecked my phone. It wouldn't even turn on. No way to fix it. I had to get a new one. The new phone didn't have our texts and chat history. Wanting to save our old messages, I told Johnny, who was at work, I need to use your phone. Sure. I unlocked it, opening our chat history. I scrolled back through and then froze at one message. Right after my accident, Johnny didn't know yet and sent me a message. It said, "Rose, can we not break off the engagement?" Turns out Johnny did want to make it work. I went to find Johnny with his phone. He saw the message too, and was surprised, then pulled me onto his lap, smiling. "After you said we should end the engagement, I couldn't sleep for days. Eventually, I decided to send you that. I just didn't expect that hours later, my mom would tell me about your accident and possible amnesia. When I visited you, I was anxious. Didn't expect you'd call me honey. At that point, I decided, even if you were lying, I'd never let you go." I was feeling emotional, tearing up when he suddenly said, "But there's one thing." "What thing?" "Other than the first fake amnesia, you haven't really called me honey since." I shamelessly kissed his cheek. "Honey, love you." Johnny smiled and kissed me back. "Love you too, babe."